Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world of velvet, powder, and whispered beauty secrets, where every bite you take or don't take can determine whether you're admired or dismissed, adored or overlooked. You're standing in the flickering glow of a grand feast hall, where velvet-draped noblewomen glance nervously at the roasted peacock and candied almonds, weighing every morsel against the harsh verdict of the mirror. Because tonight, we're not just talking about the fancy dishes of the Renaissance. No, we're diving into the secret diets of Renaissance women. Diets that promise grace and danger in equal measure. And you probably won't survive this. Only a few people in history knew about what happened in this room. Tonight, you'll be one of them, if you stay. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it there? Midnight in Venice? Dawn in Florence? I love hearing from you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself among the painted faces of a Renaissance banquet, with sweetmeats piled high and glittering goblets promising liquid rubies. There's music, a lute, a quiet flute, and the scent of roasted pheasant mixing with a dash of rosewater perfume. But behind the laughter and the plucking of lutes, there's a tightness in every bodice, a careful calculation in every bite. Tonight, you see these women, the merchant's daughter, the duke's wife, each draped in velvet and brocade. And you notice something that's hard to miss. They're not eating much. They nibble daintily on spiced fruit, sip cautiously from cups of warm claret. It's not just courtly manners. It's a performance of self-restraint. Because thinness, you learn, is the language of power here. The Renaissance was a time when art and beauty were prized above almost everything else. And in these candlelit halls, a woman's worth was often judged by the width of her waist. Beauty ideals were shaped not just by fashion plates or the paintbrush of Titian, but by the way a woman's figure slipped beneath her silk skirts. So women here learned to dance delicately on the edge of starvation, sometimes literally. A mainstream historical fact: these feasts weren't constant affairs. Banquets were showpieces, but most people, especially women, ate far less day to day. Records show that even noble women relied heavily on bread, broth, and pulses, carefully rationed to avoid looking too full in those stiff, laced bodices. It wasn't all roast swan and sugar sculptures, no matter what the paintings might suggest. But tonight, you also catch wind of a quirkier tidbit, one that's a little less gilded. Some women believe that swallowing tiny bits of crushed pearls or ground up precious stones would infuse them with an otherworldly glow. These remedies were often recommended by shady apothecaries or whispered in the steamy corners of bathhouses. Historians still argue whether these pearl powders were truly used to lighten complexions or simply to impress at feasts. Either way, a small fortune went down those delicate throats, along with a healthy dose of risk. And so you stand there, in the shadows of this grand banquet hall, watching women brush crumbs from their lips, while their stomachs growl softly beneath the layers of brocade. They smile, they murmur polite compliments, but you sense the effort it takes. Every plate of gilded sweets is a test of will. Every bite a balancing act between hunger and the ever-looming expectation of beauty. You wander closer to the main table, where a duchess fans herself slowly, her pale face framed by a stiff ruff. She lifts a tiny morsel of marzipan to her lips and pauses, hesitating, as if each sweet bite might be her undoing. She places it back on the plate. There's a murmur of approval from the ladies around her. You realize thinness is not just vanity here. It's a virtue, a demonstration of moral strength and refined self-control. You glance around and see that the men, oh, they eat heartily enough. Their bellies are proud, their cups full. But the women, they perform their restraint like a delicate minuet, each bite considered, each swallow weighed. Because to be seen as beautiful in this world is to be seen as disciplined, no matter the cost to health or happiness. You breathe in the scented air, rosemary, sage, a hint of spiced wine, and realize you're already hungry just watching them. You wonder if you'd be able to keep up this act of quiet starvation, this deadly dance of beauty. Probably not. But for these women, it's just another night beneath the flickering candles, another round in the endless war to be seen, to be admired, to be thin. You slip into the shadows of an early morning chapel, the scent of beeswax and cold stone pressing against your skin. Outside, the market stirs with the first echoes of hawkers and clattering carts. But inside, you're wrapped in silence, except for the murmured prayers of women who seem to hover between devotion and desperation. Here, pious fasting is not just an act of faith. It's another chapter in the story of beauty and power. The flickering candlelight catches the thin profile of a noblewoman, her eyes closed as she presses the rosary beads to her lips. She's fasting, she says, to honor the saints, to atone for mortal sins. But as you watch her lean against the cold stone of the confessional, you realize that her fasting is also about more than salvation. It's about the slender line of her jaw, the hollow of her throat that shows just a hint of bone. A mainstream historical fact: Renaissance women, especially the devout, often engaged in religious fasts that doubled as socially sanctioned weight control. Church calendars were peppered with feast and fast days, Lent, Advent, Vigil days, and these offered a perfect opportunity to refine one's silhouette while still appearing virtuous. It was a practice wrapped in spiritual language, but the mirror always lurked in the background. You can almost hear the soft murmur of confession behind the wooden screen. "Bless me, Father," she whispers, "for I have sinned by taking more than I needed, for wanting sweetness and honey and roasted quail when I should have been content with barley and water." Her voice trails off, a tremor of guilt mixing with the hunger in her gut. A quirky tidbit: some Renaissance women took this devotion to dramatic extremes, even performing elaborate fasts outside of religious obligations. There are records of noble women who boasted of subsisting on nothing but bread dipped in rosewater for weeks at a time, claiming the sweet perfume of the rose would sustain them. Historians still argue whether these rosewater fasts were genuine spiritual practices or just a convenient excuse for vanity, an attempt to merge piety with the perfect pale complexion. You can taste that rosewater on your tongue as you watch her bow her head, the cloying sweetness that seems to hover in the air, promising purity and beauty in equal measure. She stands slowly, knees stiff from hours of kneeling, her veil falling forward to hide the hollows of her cheeks. Outside these walls, she'll claim it's all for God, but you know there's another altar she worships at, the mirror in her bedchamber. the silent judge of every curve and contour. The priest's voice is gentle as he absolves her, but you sense the quiet collusion here. He sees the same shrinking silhouette that the world does. And maybe he even believes that her hunger is holy, that this faintness and fragility are closer to angelic perfection than any plump peasant girl could ever hope to be. As you leave the chapel, you step into the chill of morning, the world outside vibrant with life and color. Baskets of figs, bright bolts of velvet, the tang of salt air from the river. But in your mind, you're still wrapped in the hush of that sacred space, still tasting rosewater and guilt. You wonder what it would feel like to live like this, to offer up your hunger as a kind of prayer, to hope that the ache in your belly will bring you closer to grace, or at least to the kind of beauty that's been painted and praised for centuries. You see her again later, at a small gathering in the courtyard, her face pale and serene, her movements measured like the beat of a hymn. She smiles faintly when offered a plate of honeyed figs, but shakes her head. "I'm fasting," she says, and everyone nods with solemn respect. They admire her devotion, but you catch the flicker of envy in their eyes too. Because in this world, to fast is not just to worship, it's to wield a subtle, powerful kind of control. You lean back against the cool marble of a fountain, watching the gentle ripple of water and the women who glide around it like ghosts in their own stories. And you realize that in the Renaissance, even the act of not eating could be turned into an art form, a performance of virtue and vanity, sanctity and self-destruction, all bound up in the flickering light of a prayer candle. You're deep in the velvet hush of a Renaissance dressing room, the air rich with the scent of beeswax polish and the soft whisper of linen undergarments. The morning light slants in through leaded glass windows, illuminating a tangle of ribbons and laces laid out across a carved oak table. And in the center of it all, a corset, stiff, unyielding, a cage of whalebone and linen that promises to sculpt the body into an ideal. You're about to learn that beauty here isn't just about what you eat. It's about how you wear your hunger. You watch as a lady's maid, fingers quick and practiced, cinches the laces tighter with each tug, drawing in the noblewoman's waist until she gasps softly, breath caught somewhere between a prayer and a plea. The room is warm, but her skin is pale and clammy, the strain of breathlessness written in the fine sheen of sweat at her temples. You're struck by the paradox. Here is a woman of wealth and privilege, yet she must be squeezed, reshaped, disciplined by a garment that doesn't care for comfort. A mainstream historical fact. In the 15th and 16th centuries, corsetry was as much about health as it was about fashion. At least, that's what they claimed. Some medical treatises of the time recommended tight lacing to support the organs and maintain a straight, dignified posture. But you can see it now for what it really was. A way to make the body itself a work of art, a living sculpture that conformed to ideals of beauty that left little room for softness or breath. The lady's maid steps back, smoothing the folds of a velvet gown over the newly created hourglass. She murmurs approval, but you notice the faint flicker of concern in her eyes, because she knows what it means to live like this day after day, to have every meal measured against the cruel arithmetic of laces and stays, to trade comfort for the whispered promise of admiration. A quirky tidbit: some Renaissance women swore by a secret method, slipping thin slices of lemon peel under their corset stays. They believed the citrus oil would slowly leach into their skin, melting away excess flesh. Historians still argue whether this practice was real or a half-remembered folk tale whispered between laundresses and chambermaids. But either way, the idea that a bitter peel could reshape a body is as much a testament to desperation as it is to the endless hope for a miracle. You watch as the lady's hands hover over a plate of sweet almond biscuits, hesitating, because she knows that each bite must be balanced against the pressure of those unyielding stays. You almost feel the tightness in your own ribs, the squeeze of those linen bands around your chest. It's a reminder that in the Renaissance, a woman's waist wasn't just a measurement, it was a battlefield. She takes a careful bite, lips pressed tight to keep crumbs from falling on the embroidered bodice. The biscuit is sweet, but you know the taste of fear lingers stronger. Fear of losing control, fear of being judged, fear that even one indulgence might strain the laces and ruin the illusion. You realize that for these women, beauty was a performance that didn't stop at the dining table. It followed them into every breath, every meal, every quiet moment when they wondered if the mirror would still love them tomorrow. As you slip back into the shadows of that dressing room, you hear the faint echo of breath, ragged, shallow, but proud. Because here, the ability to endure the squeeze of the corset is as much a sign of status as the jewels at her throat. You wonder if you'd last a single morning in that world, trading breath for beauty, comfort for a silhouette that could win a painter's heart. Probably not. But for her, for every woman whose ribs strain against whalebone and linen, it's just another day in the quiet war of beauty. Another morning spent learning to breathe around the edges of hunger and lace. You step softly down a shadowed corridor lined with tapestries and the faint scent of beeswax, following a servant's hurried footsteps into a private solar. Here, away from the bustling feasting halls and the squeal of spinning wheels, the air is heavy with luxury and danger. Laid out on a low table is a dish that sparkles like moonlight, soup of pearls. The noblewoman seated at the table lifts a small silver spoon and stirs it gently, watching the opalescent swirls. She's about to sip from a bowl filled with crushed pearls, dissolved in a broth that promises radiance, clarity, and grace, if you can stomach the price. A mainstream historical fact. In the Renaissance, pearls were more than adornment. They were believed to have medicinal properties. Physicians and beauty manuals of the time recommended ground pearls mixed with honey or water as treatments for everything from indigestion to skin blemishes. It was a sign of wealth and privilege, certainly, but also a testament to the lengths women would go to chase an impossible beauty ideal. You watch her raise the spoon to her lips, the liquid glistening like liquid moonlight. She takes a sip, her face composed, but her eyes flicker with the knowledge that beauty always has a price. Because pearls aren't meant to be eaten, and every swallow carries the faint metallic tang of danger. A quirky tidbit. Some women believed that adding mercury to their diet, just a drop in wine or syrup, would grant them an otherworldly pallor and a smooth, unblemished complexion. Historians still argue whether this was true or just an apothecary's lie to sell more poisons. But you can't help but shudder at the thought of mercury, a poison as beautiful as it is deadly, slipping down a pale throat in the flickering candlelight. The noblewoman sets down her spoon and dabs at her lips with a scrap of embroidered linen. Her maid stands behind her, a small bottle of rose water at the ready. You can sense the tension in the room. Everyone knows that beauty is not a gentle art here. It's a deadly alchemy, a careful balance of luxury and risk. She takes another sip, her fingers white-knuckled around the silver handle. You see it now, the way luxury can curdle into desperation, how a beautiful face in a portrait might be the result of something far darker than good lighting and talented brushwork. You lean against the carved wooden wall, the tapestry behind you full of mythic beasts and hunting scenes. But in this small room, the real hunt is for the perfect skin, the perfect waist, the perfect illusion of effortless beauty. And the prey? It's the women themselves. The noblewoman's hand trembles slightly as she sets aside the half-finished bowl. The maid steps forward, murmuring something soothing as she helps her mistress rise. Outside these walls, no one will know what she's done to chase that faint glow in the mirror. To the world, she'll be a vision of grace and refinement. But you've seen the truth in the shimmer of pearls and the silent promise of mercury. You slip back into the corridor, the faint taste of salt and metal on your tongue, and wonder how long you'd last if the price of beauty was measured not in gold coins, but in the slow poison of perfection. Probably not long. But here, in the world of the Renaissance, beauty and danger are always served in the same dish. Just ask the woman in the velvet gown with the faint tremor in her hand. Don't just listen. Feel this story. It was kept alive for someone. Maybe that someone is you. You follow the winding corridor into a stone-walled kitchen, warm with the glow of the hearth and the clatter of iron pots. The air here is different, smoky, rich with the scent of lentils simmering in an iron cauldron. It's Lent, and in the Renaissance, that means more than just piety. It means a carefully curated diet that walks the fine line between religious devotion and the ever-present desire to keep one's figure slender and ethereal. The cook, an older woman with flour-dusted hands, stirs the bubbling pot, her wooden spoon tapping the rim in time with the rhythm of the kitchen. You see the scullery maids moving like shadows, washing handfuls of bitter greens, slicing stale bread into careful strips. It's all so precise, so controlled, just like the women who will eat these meager Lenten meals in the candlelit halls above. A mainstream historical fact. During Lent, Renaissance kitchens shifted from rich meats and cheeses to simpler fare. Lentils, fish, root vegetables. No butter, no eggs, no sweetmeats to tempt the flesh. It was a time of public devotion, but for noblewomen, it also offered a rare chance to satisfy the demand for thinness under the respectable cloak of religious sacrifice. You watch the cook ladle out bowls of lentil stew, the thin broth studded with the occasional sliver of carrot or onion. There's no luxury here, no gilded edges or sugared fruits, just humble fare that will keep the body moving, if not thriving. And you see how the noble women, who sit in the upper chambers with their rosaries and prayer books, secretly welcome this season of austerity. Because in the absence of feasts, they find a subtle freedom to shrink themselves further, to drift closer to the Renaissance ideal of angelic frailty. A quirky tidbit: some ladies' maids whispered that a diet of lentils and vinegar-soaked bread could slim a waist faster than any corset lacing. Historians still argue whether these whispered recipes were based on real results or simply the desperate hope of women who saw no other way to please the mirror's cruel gaze. You listen as the cook hums softly to herself, the same melody she's carried for decades, an old tune about lost love and spilled milk. Her voice is rough, but there's something comforting in it, something that belongs to the hearth, and the pot, and the long, slow hours of stirring. She looks up and catches your eye, smiling faintly as she hands off a bowl to a young scullery maid. "Careful," she says. "It's hot." You imagine how many women have eaten from that same ladle. How many have swallowed those thin, bitter meals with the same mixture of faith and fear. Upstairs, the noble women kneel in prayer, their heads bowed and their stomachs as empty as their spirits are meant to be full. But you see it for what it is, a dance of piety and beauty, a way to turn the hollow ache of hunger into a sign of devotion that's as admired as any jewel or velvet gown. You slip back into the corner of the kitchen, the shadows cool, and the scent of lentils thicken your nose. You wonder if you'd find comfort in this meager fare, if you'd embrace the chance to fast and fade like the noble women who drift through the halls above. Probably not. But in this world, every bowl of lentil stew is more than a meal. It's a quiet battle against appetite and expectation, fought with nothing more than a wooden spoon and a whispered prayer. You slip into a steamy chamber where the scent of lavender and rosemary hangs thick in the air, mingling with the quiet murmur of water. The bathhouse is alive with gossip, laughter, and the secret rituals of beauty that unfold behind its heavy wooden doors. Here, amid warm water and flickering lamplight, Renaissance women share more than cleansing routines. They share the quiet desperation of perfecting themselves from the inside out. The bathhouse is a refuge, a place where corsets are loosened and hair is unbound. You watch as a noblewoman lowers herself into the steaming pool, her sigh of relief echoed by the gentle lapping of water against the marble edge. Around her, women trade recipes and remedies like currency. Tiny sachets of herbs for bright skin, whispered words of warning about the dangers of heavy powders and strange tonics. A mainstream historical fact: bathhouses in Renaissance Italy were both social hubs and places of quiet indulgence, where women gathered to gossip, share beauty tips, and drink concoctions meant to purify the body and spirit. They believed that herbal brews could restore balance, mugs of rosemary tea to warm the blood, sage infusions to chase away melancholy. You lean close, listening to the low hum of conversation as steam curls around your ears. A merchant's wife confides in a friend that she's been drinking nothing but warm water with a slice of lemon for days, hoping to banish the puffiness from her face. Another woman scoffs gently, swearing by a blend of sweet violet petals and mint, said to calm the mind and soothe the skin. You see the way their eyes flicker to the smoothness of each other's shoulders, the hollow of each other's collarbones. A quirky tidbit: some bathhouse recipes included powdered coral or even ground stag's horn mixed with honey and wine for a radiant complexion. Historians still argue whether these ingredients did anything but lighten a purse and shorten a life. But the bathhouse, with its warm embrace and heady perfume, offers a moment of hope in a world that demands so much from every curve and every breath. You watch as the noblewoman runs a soft cloth over her pale arms, the warm water turning them pink. She closes her eyes, drifting somewhere between relaxation and anxiety. Because even here, in this quiet sanctuary, the pressure to be beautiful never quite dissolves. Her maid sits nearby with a small pot of vinegar and rose water, ready to dab away any hint of excess oil, any trace of imperfection. You drift along the edge of the pool, listening as the women murmur about the latest portrait at court, the latest scandal in the pages of some gossip pamphlet. And beneath it all, you hear the same question repeated in different voices. How do you do it? What is your secret? Because in the world of the Renaissance, beauty is never just skin deep. It's 1,000 tiny choices, 1,000 small sacrifices hidden beneath silk and velvet. You watch the noble woman step from the water, her skin flushed, her shoulders trembling from the heat. Her maid wraps her in linen, tucks a sprig of rosemary behind her ear. Outside these walls, she will be a vision of calm perfection. But here, in the warm hush of the bathhouse, she lets herself be soft, if only for a moment. You slip out into the cool night air, the last wisp of steam clinging to your skin. You wonder if you'd find peace in those warm pools, or if the pressure to be perfect would follow you even there, like a shadow. Probably not. But for these women, the bathhouse is a small mercy. One more place to fight the endless war for beauty, armed with nothing more than herbs, hot water, and quiet resolve. You edge deeper into the labyrinth of the Renaissance mansion, past the laughter of bathhouses and the quiet sanctity of Lent. Now you stand in a small, dimly lit room that smells of earth and iron, an apothecary's kitchen, part alchemist's laboratory, and part clandestine beauty salon. Here, jars of powdered roots and vials of scented oils crowd every shelf, each promising a different kind of perfection, a different shade of mortality. The apothecary, a man with stained fingers and eyes that dart like birds, lifts a pestle and crushes dried petals into a fine powder. He murmurs softly, half to himself and half to the maid who stands watching, desperate to learn the secrets of this place. You catch snatches of his words. For the skin, for the blood, to smooth, to sharpen. A mainstream historical fact. Many Renaissance apothecaries doubled as beauty merchants, blending medicine and magic in a single breath. Recipes for balms and tonics blurred the line between healing and beautification, with ingredients as exotic as ground unicorn horn. Spoiler, it was just narwhal tusk. And as deadly as mercury and lead. The maid leans forward as he opens a small jar of white powder, Venetian ceruse, a lead-based cosmetic that promised a flawless, moonlit complexion. He dabs a bit onto the back of her hand, and you watch her eyes widen at the cool, smooth finish. She doesn't know, or chooses not to know, that it's poison as much as perfection. A quirky tidbit: some recipes for beauty included snail water, a curious concoction made from distilled snails said to clear the skin and bring a rosy glow. Historians still argue whether this worked at all, or was just a curious novelty. But in this room, you see the eager hope in the maid's eyes, a hope that outshines common sense. The apothecary gestures to another jar, powdered pearl, to mix into water or wine, a pinch of ground coral for the lips, a few drops of laudanum to steady the nerves before a grand feast. Every recipe here is a promise, every vial a secret that might bring her closer to the mirror's ideal, or send her spinning into ruin. You watch as she listens, wide-eyed, to every word, clutching a small pouch of coins in her hand. She asks about a recipe to soften the eyes, a drop of belladonna perhaps, to dilate the pupils and bring a look of dreamy fragility. The apothecary hesitates. He knows the dangers of belladonna, how it can blur the mind as easily as it softens a gaze, but he writes down the recipe anyway, because beauty here is a currency, and every secret has a price. You lean closer, the scent of crushed herbs thick and heady. There's lavender and sage, but also something bitter and sharp, like the tang of a secret kept too long. You wonder if you'd be brave enough to swallow these poisons for a chance at that luminous glow, or if you'd walk away, content with the soft imperfection of living skin. Probably not. But in this quiet room, you see how the line between medicine and madness can slip away, ground to powder in the apothecary's mortar. The maid leaves with her small jar of ceruse and a bottle of rose-infused vinegar, her head high and her footsteps quick. Outside, she'll be admired for her pale, perfect skin. But you know what she's carrying in that velvet pouch? Not just a beauty secret, but a slow, shimmering death that she'll wear like a crown. You slip back into the night, the memory of the apothecary's kitchen clinging to your senses. It's a reminder that in the Renaissance, beauty was never just about creams and powders. It was a careful alchemy, a dance on the knife edge of desire and danger. You're back in the grand hall of a Renaissance palace, the flicker of candles dancing across gold-edged tapestries, and the sweet, heady scent of spiced wine filling your lungs. Tonight is a feast fit for a queen, and you can almost taste the roasted swan and sugared dates that line the long tables. But as you watch the noblewomen glide between platters of delicacies, you see something else. The quiet refusal that shapes their every movement. The delicate dance of indulgence and denial that forms the heart of their secret diets. A mainstream historical fact. Renaissance queens and princesses were expected to embody the ideal of courtly beauty, pale, slender, and graceful. Portraits from the period show waists cinched tight and faces as smooth as polished marble. But behind those elegant visages lay endless hours of careful self-denial. Even the queens were not exempt from the harsh judgments of fashion and power, and each bite was weighed against the demands of the mirror and the throne. You watch as a queen, draped in velvet and pearls, leans back in her high-backed chair, her fingers idly tracing the edge of her golden goblet. She smiles, demure and composed, as the court musician strums a soft melody in the corner. But when the servant offers her a plate of honey-glazed almonds, she shakes her head. "I am not hungry," she murmurs, and the servant bows and retreats. You know it's not true. Her hunger is a secret flame, a constant ache beneath the heavy silk of her gown. But to show it would be to admit weakness, to let the mask of effortless beauty slip even for a moment. A quirky tidbit. Some royal courts believed in the slimming power of songbirds, tiny larks and sparrows stuffed with herbs and roasted whole. The theory went that consuming such small, delicate creatures would imbue a woman's body with the same lightness and fragility. Historians still argue whether these meals actually made a difference, or if they were simply another performance of refinement. But as you watch the queen's eyes flicker to a platter of golden larks, you can't help but feel the weight of that fantasy. Beauty at any cost, even if it meant swallowing something that once sang sweetly at dawn. The musicians play on, filling the hall with gentle strains of lute and flute, but you can almost hear the hush of breath beneath the music, the quiet, collective exhale of women who will not allow themselves to eat more than a bite or two. Because here, even the queen's feast is a stage, and every movement, every refusal, is watched and measured like a performance. You drift closer to the dais, the scent of roasted rosemary and clove brushing your nose. The queen lifts a small glass of spiced wine, tilting it just enough to let the ruby liquid catch the light. She sips, just enough to wet her lips, then sets it aside. Her ladies-in-waiting follow her lead, each of them taking only the smallest tastes their laughter light and musical, but their eyes sharp with calculation. You wonder what it would be like to live under that constant scrutiny, to have every mouthful watched and weighed by the entire court. Probably not something you'd survive for long, but for the queen and her ladies, it's the price of power and beauty, an endless performance that leaves no room for comfort or indulgence. As the night deepens, the feast becomes a test of endurance. The men laugh and clap each other on the back, plates piled high with roasted meats and buttery pastries. But the women? They sip warm broth and nibble on candied fruit, each bite a careful negotiation between desire and expectation. You see how their fingers tremble just slightly as they set down their spoons, how their eyes dart to the mirror-polished silver of the goblets, reflecting every curve, every imagined flaw. You catch snippets of conversation as you move along the edge of the hall. One lady murmuring about a new herbal syrup said to melt away fat. Another confessing in a low voice that she's begun drinking vinegar with her morning bread to keep her stomach flat. These aren't just idle tales. They're the secret weapons in the endless battle to stay slim, to stay desirable, to stay safe. A servant passes by with a tray of sugar-dusted dates, and you watch as a young countess reaches for one, then pulls her hand back at the last second, her fingers curling around nothing but air. Her smile doesn't falter, but you see the shadow in her eyes, a flicker of longing quickly buried beneath the practiced elegance of her gaze. It's a dance of hunger and self-control, one that leaves no room for softness or satisfaction. You slip back into the shadows, the music washing over you in gentle waves. You wonder if these women ever dream of simply eating until they're full, of laughing with their mouths full of sweetmeats and roasted chestnuts. Probably not in this world. Here, beauty is as much about denial as it is about adornment, a quiet, constant hunger that shapes every breath and every bite. The queen rises, her pale hand resting on the arm of her chair. The hall falls silent as she glides forward, her steps measured and regal. She pauses at the edge of the dais, her eyes sweeping the room. In that moment, she is everything the Renaissance demands of a queen, poised, perfect, and impossibly slender. But you know the truth. Behind that flawless exterior lies a body held in check by 1,000 small refusals, a life measured out in careful sips and polite smiles. You watch her disappear behind a velvet curtain, her ladies following close behind. The hall erupts in applause, but you're left with the faint echo of footsteps and the soft sigh of a woman who has learned to hunger so gracefully it looks like art. You slip away from the glow of the feast and into the quiet of the kitchens, where the air is thick with the scent of roasting herbs and the soft hiss of boiling broth. Tonight, you're following the faint trace of a different kind of diet, one whispered about in the corridors of power and privilege, saffron and songbirds. You pause at the doorway to the kitchen garden, where cages of tiny larks and thrushes wait in the moonlight, their small bodies trembling in the shadows. A kitchen boy passes you with a basket of fresh-cut rosemary, his face solemn as he glances at the birds. In this world, even the soft chirp of dawn can become an ingredient in the endless quest for beauty. A mainstream historical fact, Renaissance cookbooks are filled with recipes for small birds roasted whole, stuffed with sweet herbs, and gilded with saffron and sugar. The rich believed that eating such delicate creatures would somehow lend them an air of refinement, a sense of fragility that echoed the fragile beauty praised in poetry and song. But for the women at court, these tiny birds were more than a delicacy. They were a promise of thinness, a meal that wouldn't weigh them down or bloat their slender silhouettes. You watch as the cook plucks a bird from its cage, his hands gentle but unyielding. He works with quiet precision, stuffing the lark with a mixture of saffron and sweet herbs, the air thick with the golden spice's musky perfume. The bird is small, its bones so fine they seem almost transparent. You wonder at the contradiction, how something so slight can carry such weight in the minds of those who would consume it. A quirky tidbit. Some ladies believed that eating saffron-dusted larks would grant them not just a slimmer waist, but also a complexion kissed by the sun. Historians still argue whether the saffron's golden hue truly worked such magic, or if it was merely a hopeful myth spun in the hot kitchens of palace gossip. But here, in the warm hush of the hearth, you can almost see the dream glimmering in the steam rising from the pot. The cook places the lark on a small silver tray, its skin glistening with a sheen of oil and gold. A young scullery maid carries it away, her footsteps soft as she navigates the narrow passageways back to the grand hall. You follow, your shadow flickering against the stone walls as you slip behind her. The noblewomen are gathered in a smaller chamber now, away from the loud laughter of the main feast. They sit in a half circle, their eyes fixed on the small golden bird as it's set before them. One by one, they take the smallest of bites, their fingers delicate and precise. The saffron stains their lips a faint yellow, a fleeting echo of the sun in a world that prefers the pale glow of the moon. You see how they lean in, how each morsel becomes a performance, an assertion that they can eat without eating, that they can taste luxury without succumbing to the fullness it promises. There's a hush in the room, broken only by the quiet clink of silver forks against porcelain plates. Outside, the night air is cool and still, but in this room, the air is thick with the scent of gilded longing. You notice how one young woman, her hair bound in a delicate net of pearls, hesitates before each bite. She's new to this world, her face still round with the softness of youth. She wants to belong, to be seen as delicate and refined, but you can see the strain in her eyes. She wants to eat the whole lark, to savor every golden crumb, but she knows she can't. So she takes only the tiniest taste, her lips parting around a single gilded bite. You wonder what it would be like to live like this, to see every meal as a threat and a promise, to measure each bite not by how it fills you, but by how it empties you. Probably not something you'd last long at. But for these women, it's a ritual as important as any prayer or poem. Because here, thinness is not just a fashion, it's a kind of currency, a way to prove you belong in this world of silken whispers and mirrored sighs. The young woman sets down her fork and dabs at her lips with a lace-trimmed handkerchief. Her eyes flicker to the window, where the moon hangs low and bright. For a moment, you see the flicker of doubt, the question of whether this golden feast will ever be enough, if anything will. But she blinks it away, and the room moves on, the performance resuming with every delicate, deliberate bite. You step back into the corridor, the scent of saffron and roasted lark clinging to your senses. You think of the birds in their cages, of the bright golden powder that promised so much and delivered so little. And you realize that in this world, every meal is a spell, every bite a small magic that can lift or destroy, depending on how it's used. You drift into a hushed bedchamber, lit only by the glow of a single candle. The scent of warm beeswax and faint traces of vinegar fill the air as you watch a noblewoman delicately tear off a piece of bread and soak it in a small bowl of dark liquid, vinegar. She lifts it to her lips with a practiced grace, her face composed, though her eyes betray the faint flicker of hunger that never seems to leave her. A mainstream historical fact. In the Renaissance, vinegar was more than a kitchen staple. It was believed to cleanse the blood, aid digestion, and slim the waist. Diets that included vinegar-soaked bread or diluted vinegar drinks became a quiet yet potent part of beauty routines. These treatments were particularly popular among women desperate to maintain the thin, elegant lines praised in paintings and poems alike. You watch as she takes a small bite, the tang of vinegar making her lips purse slightly. She closes her eyes as she swallows, perhaps imagining the acid working its quiet magic in her belly, burning away indulgence, shrinking her to the ideal. You wonder if she even tastes the bread anymore, or if she's learned to savor only the promise of transformation. A quirky tidbit: some Renaissance ladies took their vinegar even further, soaking small cakes of barley or oat bread until they nearly dissolved into mush. They claimed that this sour porridge would smooth the skin and sharpen the mind, though historians still argue whether these claims had any basis in fact, or were simply the hopeful whispers of a world obsessed with refinement. You see how she sits, spine straight and hands folded neatly in her lap, every inch of her posture a study in restraint. The candlelight flickers across her face, casting delicate shadows that only accentuate the hollow of her cheeks, the fine line of her jaw. She is beautiful, yes, but you see too the cost of that beauty in the way her shoulders slump when she thinks no one is watching, in the slow, careful way she chews each bite. The room is quiet, except for the soft rustle of her silk sleeves as she lifts another piece of vinegar-soaked bread to her lips. You can almost taste the sour tang in your own mouth, the way it makes your tongue curl and your stomach clench. She eats slowly, methodically, as if each bite were a step in a carefully choreographed dance she's been performing all her life. You wonder what it would be like to live this way, to let the vinegar burn in your throat and convince yourself it's worth it, that the sour pain is a sign you're winning the battle against your own body. Probably not a dance you'd choose to join, but for her, it's as essential as her prayers, as constant as the breath she takes between each measured mouthful. The window is open just a crack, and a cool breeze slips in, stirring the heavy drapes and bringing with it the distant scent of rosemary and wood smoke. She pauses, her eyes drifting to the faint glow of the city beyond. There's a softness in her gaze for just a moment, a longing for something easier, something sweeter. But she blinks, and the moment is gone, replaced by the quiet determination that has carried her through every sip of sour wine, every measured bite of vinegar bread. She finishes her meal with a slow, deliberate grace, setting the bowl aside and pressing a lace handkerchief to her lips. You know she will rise in the morning and face another day of the same careful rituals, another day of whispered promises that this sour liquid is the secret to being loved, admired, remembered. You slip back into the shadows of the room, the faint echo of her quiet meal clinging to your senses. You wonder if the vinegar truly works, if it ever did, or if it's simply another chapter in the endless story of women willing to endure any hardship to fit a mold that was never made for them. Historians still argue, and so do you, in the quiet of your mind. But tonight, in this small chamber lit by a single candle, the only certainty is the sharp, lingering taste of vinegar, and the knowledge that for some, it's a price they're willing to pay. You slip from the vinegar-scented bedchamber to a corner of the palace where no polite conversation dares to go. A small, dark closet where young maids huddle in whispered circles, sharing the quiet horror of a craving that can't be spoken at court. Tonight, you're stepping into the secret world of Pika, where the hunger for beauty and the desperation to conform collide in the most dangerous of ways. You press your back against the cold stone wall, the flickering light of a tallow candle casting long shadows across the room. In the center sits a young maid, her face pale and drawn, her hands folded over a small wooden bowl filled with chalky white powder. She dips her fingers into the powder, lifts it to her lips, and swallows, her eyes closing in a moment of relief, or perhaps resignation. A mainstream historical fact, Pika, the compulsive eating of non-food substances like chalk, clay, or even plaster, was a documented condition in the Renaissance, though it was rarely spoken of in polite circles. Medical texts of the time mention it as a curious affliction, but for the women who suffered it, it was as real as any other hunger. Born of nutritional deficiencies, of quiet desperation, or of the overwhelming pressure to remain thin and lovely at any cost. You watch as she takes another bite, the powder clinging to her fingertips like pale dust. Her friend leans closer, whispering that the chalk will quiet the belly, will make the gnawing emptiness feel like control. You can hear the tremor in her voice, the same mix of fear and fascination that's shared by every woman in this shadowed room. A quirky tidbit: some apothecaries sold specially prepared clay, said to be purifying for the blood and the complexion. It was packaged in pretty little jars, as though the beauty of the container could disguise the danger within. Historians still argue whether this was a real treatment or a quiet collusion in the silent war these women waged against their own bodies. You watch as the maid's face flushes slightly, her breathing slow and deliberate. She closes her eyes and hums softly, a wordless lullaby to calm the unease in her belly. Around her, the other maids trade bits of gossip and small comforts: lavender sachets for sleepless nights, mint leaves to chew when the chalk grows too bitter. There's a sisterhood here, in the shadows, born of shared hunger and shared fear. You wonder what it would be like to be so desperate for thinness, for beauty, that you'd swallow earth and stone just to silence the ache. Probably not a road you'd choose. But for these women, the chalky tang on their tongues is a small rebellion against the world's impossible demands. A way to say, I can control this. I can make myself what they want me to be. The maid sets the bowl aside, her fingers white with dust. She wipes them on her apron and rises, her movements careful and measured. You see the faint shimmer of sweat on her forehead, the way her shoulders slope forward with the weight of this secret she carries like a talisman. She doesn't speak as she slips from the room, but you hear the quiet chorus of the others, a gentle murmur of reassurance, of shared complicity. You linger in the doorway, the air heavy with the scent of chalk and the unspoken promise of more. You wonder if the men at court ever see this part of the story, if they know that behind the poised, powdered faces of the women they admire lie these small, desperate rituals, these hidden feasts of earth and dust. Probably not, but you see it now, and you know that that in the Renaissance, beauty was never simple. It was a performance, a hunger, and a secret all at once. A quiet, deadly ballet danced in the shadowed corners of the palace. You slip away into the night, the taste of chalk lingering in your thoughts. You wonder how many of these women survived this secret hunger, how many learned to balance it with the demands of the world above. Historians still argue whether pica was truly a disease of the body or a silent cry of the soul. But for tonight, in this dark, candlelit room, it's a testament to the quiet terror and the quiet strength that beauty demanded. You wander into a dim hallway, your footsteps echoing softly on worn flagstones. Outside, the bells of a nearby chapel toll the slow hour of dawn. But in this hush of candlelight and sleeping tapestries, you're not here for prayer. You're here to catch a quiet sigh, soft and sharp, of a different kind of devotion. The bright, bittersweet dream of citrus fruit in a world starved of sweetness. You find yourself in a small chamber tucked behind a kitchen garden, the air sharp with the scent of lemons and oranges piled in neat wooden crates. A young noblewoman stands at the window, a single orange in her hand, turning it over and over as though it holds the secret to everything she's been taught to want. A mainstream historical fact: citrus fruit was a rare and precious delicacy in Renaissance Italy, imported along winding trade routes from sunlit groves along the Mediterranean. Oranges, lemons, and even bitter citrons were prized not just for their sweet bite, but for the promise of vitality they carried, bright color and sharp tang in a world of bread and broth. She lifts the orange to her lips, breathing deeply of its tangy scent, her fingers brushing the dimpled skin. She knows, because she's been told by mothers, by ladies-in-waiting, by the world outside, that citrus is both luxury and necessity. It promises to keep away scurvy, to banish the faintness that creeps into a woman's cheeks when she's lived too long on lentils and vinegar-soaked bread. A quirky tidbit: some Renaissance beauty recipes called for citrus peel steeped in rosewater, dabbed onto the face as a tonic said to brighten and tighten the skin. Historians still argue whether these treatments truly worked or were just another chapter in the endless dance of half-truths and hopeful illusions. You watch her peel the orange, the scent of sweet oil misting into the cold morning air. She closes her eyes as she pulls away the skin, each segment a tiny sunburst in her pale hand. There's something almost reverent in the way she brings the first bite to her lips, as though she's tasting not just fruit, but a promise, a brief, bright spark in a life of endless discipline. But she doesn't swallow it all. She holds the segment in her mouth for a moment, savoring the burst of sharp, sweet juice before slipping it back into the palm of her hand. She will take only a little, just enough to feel the bright flame of it on her tongue, just enough to say she's alive, no more. Because to indulge fully, to let herself be filled and warmed by the sun's promise, would be to surrender control, to betray the pale perfection that's demanded of her. You wonder how it feels to taste that fleeting sweetness and then set it aside, to deny yourself the one small pleasure in a world that already takes so much. Probably not something you'd choose. But for her, this orange is more than a fruit. It's a balancing act, a bright burst of life in a world that prefers its women pale and subdued. She presses the peel to her lips, letting the oil sting softly. Her skin glows in the candlelight, and for a moment she looks almost alive, almost free. But then she sets the orange aside, her fingers trembling just slightly. She smooths her skirts and turns away from the window, her face once more composed and distant. You linger by the door, the scent of citrus sharp in your nose, and wonder if she dreams of warm summer days and baskets of sun-ripened fruit, or if she's learned to dream only of hollow stomachs and the faint thrill of a mirror's approval. Outside, the first light of morning glows at the edges of the window panes. She moves to close the shutters, shutting out the dawn. Because here, in the world of the Renaissance, even a single orange can be too bright, too full, too alive to be allowed. You step back into a narrow corridor, the hush of the morning pressing in as you follow the quiet echo of footsteps down to a small chamber filled with the delicate perfume of roses. Here, in the half-light, the sweet scent masks something darker, a sour tang that clings to every breath. Tonight, you're tracing the rosewater rituals of Renaissance women and the hidden rot beneath their petal-scented prayers. You watch as a young noblewoman stands before a polished copper mirror, a small bottle of rosewater in her hand. She dabs it gently onto her throat and wrists, the soft patter of droplets like a lullaby. Her reflection glows in the dim light, a vision of pale beauty and soft elegance. But beneath the glow, you can almost taste the stale air of a room where no bread has been broken, no true meal shared in days. A mainstream historical fact: rosewater was a staple of Renaissance beauty, used to scent hair, soften skin, and even flavor the rare sweet delicacies served in noble courts. It was luxury and cleanliness, a veil of refinement in a world that often smelled of sweat and smoke. She tips the bottle, breathing in the gentle sweetness as though it might banish the constant ache in her belly. You know she's learned to wear that scent like a shield, a way to hide the sour breath of hunger that follows her wherever she goes. Because no matter how lovely the roses, nothing can mask the rot of an empty stomach for long. A quirky tidbit: some women believed that rinsing their mouths with rosewater would not only sweeten their breath, but also protect them from the faintness of starvation. Historians still argue whether this was real hygiene or simply another desperate attempt to keep up appearances in a world that prized illusion over comfort. You see the soft flicker of a smile on her lips as she smooths the rosewater into her skin, her fingers delicate and precise. She's a portrait come to life, every detail chosen to perfection. But you notice, too, the way her shoulders sag when she thinks no one's watching, the way her fingers tremble just slightly as she sets the bottle down. The mirror reflects her face, smooth, pale, and composed, but you can almost see the hollow ache beneath her skin, the quiet desperation that no rosewater can ever fully cover. She tilts her head, studying her reflection like a painter's model, searching for flaws no one else can see. You wonder if you'd have the strength to keep up the performance, to smile sweetly with rose-scented breath while your stomach gnaws at you from within. Probably not. But for her, this is as much a part of survival as the heavy silks and pearl-trimmed veils she wears each day. A careful ritual of sweetness to hide the bitter truth. She turns from the mirror, the faint scent of roses trailing in her wake as she slips out of the room. You linger a moment longer, the air thick with perfume and the unspoken confession of an empty belly. You wonder how many women have stood in this same small room, how many have clung to the promise of rosewater even as their bodies betrayed them. Outside the chamber, the faint clang of the kitchen bell calls servants to prepare another round of gilded feasts for the men in velvet coats. But here, in this small, sweet-scented world, the real feast is silence. One more night of surviving on breath and illusion. You slip back into the corridor, the memory of roses and the sour tang of hunger mingling on your tongue. And you realize that in the Renaissance, beauty was never as simple as sweet scents and soft petals. It was a careful balancing act, played out in every breath and every secret scent, every sigh hidden behind a polished copper mirror. You wander through a silent hallway, the hush of tapestries and the chill of stone pressing around you, and find yourself in a tiny alcove where the scent of warm milk curls softly in the air. A single candle flickers on a narrow wooden shelf, its glow catching the sheen of a silver cup half filled with a white liquid. Tonight, you're watching a lady-in-waiting sip from that cup, the soft comfort of milk touched by something far more dangerous, mercury. She lifts the cup with a steady hand, her face a mask of calm, though you see the faint tremor in her fingers. She drinks slowly, the milk rich and soothing, a quiet comfort in the cold dawn light. But you know, because you've seen it whispered in the bathhouses, written in the careful hand of an apothecary's recipe, that this milk is laced with more than warmth. It's touched by mercury, a shimmering, silvery poison believed to banish blemishes and grant a radiant glow that no honest meal could ever offer. A mainstream historical fact, mercury was used in Renaissance beauty treatments, most famously in ointments and ceruse powders for the skin. It was seen as a miracle cure for everything from freckles to smallpox scars, a potent weapon in the endless battle for flawlessness. But the cost was steep. Tremors, madness, and slow, steady ruin that no painted cheek or powdered brow could ever truly hide. You watch as she sets the cup down, her breath slow and measured. Her lips are pale, her skin luminous in the candlelight, and you wonder if she sees the faint shimmer of death in the silver liquid. Probably not. In this world, the promise of beauty is stronger than any quiet warning of danger. A quirky tidbit. Some Renaissance ladies swore that sipping warm milk, laced with a drop of mercury, could clear the blood and brighten the eyes. Historians still argue whether this was a real practice or an apothecary's myth. Another chapter in the quiet story of women willing to believe almost anything in the name of beauty. She stands, her movements fluid and deliberate, and dabs a cloth across her lips to hide the milk's soft sheen. In the flicker of candlelight, you see the faint hollow at the base of her throat, the fragile bones of her wrist. She is lovely, no doubt, fragile and bright as the moonlight on silver. But you see, too, the cost written in the soft sag of her shoulders, the quiet flicker of unease in her eyes when she thinks no one is watching. She whispers to a maid as she passes, the words too soft for you to catch, but the maid nods, slipping the silver cup away to be cleaned and hidden once more. Because here, in the world of the Renaissance, even poison is an intimate secret, shared only in the hush of dawn and the silence of empty hallways. You slip back into the shadows, the memory of warm milk and cold mercury lingering on your tongue. You wonder if you'd have the courage to swallow that sweet, deadly promise, to trade the slow comfort of bread and broth for the quick silver glow of an illusion. Probably not. But for her, and for so many like her, it's a choice she makes each day. A quiet war fought in the flicker of a candle, in the silver shimmer of a cup raised to trembling lips. Outside, the first bells of morning echo in the distance, calling the city to life. But in this small alcove, the world is still, and the only sound is the soft breath of a woman who has learned to drink both beauty and danger in a single steady swallow. You step into the quiet cool of a Renaissance garden at dusk, the air thick with the scent of lavender, and the gentle rustle of leaves as a soft breeze stirs the carefully tended hedges. Lanterns flicker to life along the gravel paths, pools of light that dance like fireflies in the gathering dark. But tonight, you're not here for the roses or the singing fountains. You're here to watch a young woman move carefully through the garden, her eyes searching the shadows for something far more dangerous than beauty. You watch as she bends low, her fingers brushing the leaves of a squat, dark plant that shivers in the night air. Belladonna, deadly nightshade, the plant that carries both a promise and a curse. Her breath catches in her throat as she plucks a single dark berry, holding it up to the lantern light. In the flicker of flame, it glistens like a drop of midnight, a tiny, perfect secret. A mainstream historical fact. Nightshade and other toxic herbs were well known in the Renaissance, both for their medicinal uses and for their dangerous allure. Women whispered that belladonna, used sparingly, could dilate the pupils and lend the eyes a soft, luminous darkness that poets raved about, a look of languid fragility that was the height of courtly beauty. She slips the berry into a small pouch at her waist, careful to keep it hidden from the watchful eyes of the garden's night guards. You see the tremor in her hands as she straightens, the quick, shallow breath of someone who knows the weight of the choice she's made. She turns to a small stone bench where another woman waits, her hands folded neatly in her lap. There's a moment of quiet, a shared glance that speaks of secrets and half-remembered recipes. A quirky tidbit. Some Renaissance ladies believed that nightshade could be brewed into a beauty potion to give them that ghostly, ethereal look that was so prized in portraits. Historians still argue whether these brews were real or just the fever dreams of desperate women. But you can see, in the careful way she measures the berries, that the belief is real enough to risk everything. You watch as she crushes the berry gently between her fingers, the dark juice staining her skin like ink. She lifts it to her lips, just a drop on her tongue. Enough, she hopes, to bring that dreamy, doe-eyed look the poets adore, without tipping into the deadly sleep that waits just beyond. Her friend watches closely, ready to help if the line between beauty and poison blurs too far. You see the way her eyes widen slightly, the faint sheen of tears as the nightshade begins to work its slow, quiet magic. In the half-light, her pupils bloom into pools of darkness, and for a moment, she looks like the painting of a saint, fragile, luminous, and heartbreakingly beautiful. But you know the cost of that beauty, the slow, steady burn of poison in her blood that no poem can ever capture. She leans back against the bench, her breath coming soft and quick. Her friend reaches out to steady her, their fingers brushing in a silent promise of complicity. You wonder what it feels like to trade your comfort for a single moment of impossible loveliness, to sip from the cup of nightshade and hope the gods of beauty are feeling merciful tonight. Probably not a price you'd choose to pay, but for her, in this world that measures a woman's worth in the width of her waist and the softness of her gaze, it's a risk she'll take again and again. The garden around them seems to hold its breath, the scent of crushed herbs and warm earth mingling with the sweet, bitter tang of nightshade on the breeze. Lanterns flicker like distant stars, their light too soft to reveal the sharp edge of desperation in the curve of her lips, the hollow beneath her collarbone. A night guard passes by, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. The two women go still, the shadows swallowing their secret. When he's gone, they breathe again, the momentary danger only deepening the thrill of what they've done. Because in the world of the Renaissance, beauty is never just about what you show. It's about what you're willing to hide, what you're willing to risk. She rises from the bench, her eyes still wide and dark, the nightshade singing in her veins. She slips the small pouch back into the folds of her skirt, a silent prayer for tomorrow's mirror to show her the face she's willing to die for. Her friend takes her arm, and together they disappear into the labyrinth of hedges, two ghosts in a garden that has seen more secrets than any confessor's booth. You linger a moment longer, the scent of night-blooming jasmine and crushed nightshade heavy in the air. You wonder if the poets would still sing of her beauty if they knew what she'd swallowed to make it real. Probably not. But here, in the garden's quiet heart, the only truth that matters is this: beauty is never free, and every bright eye, every fragile cheek is paid for in whispers and poison. As you turn to leave, the garden seems to sigh around you, the wind rustling the leaves in a soft lament. You know you'll carry this moment with you. The glint of the nightshade berry, the shimmer of lantern light on pale skin, the silent pact between two women who know that sometimes the only way to survive in a world that demands perfection is to risk everything for a glimpse of it. You drift back inside, the chill of the night garden still clinging to your senses, and find yourself in a small antechamber where candlelight flickers across polished wood and rich tapestries. Here, in the warm hush of the evening, you catch the faint strains of a madrigal, soft, lilting voices weaving through the air like silk. But the beauty of the music is just a backdrop for something sharper, more insistent, the quiet whispers of thinness, spoken not as confession, but as aspiration. You watch as a small group of women gather in a circle, their laughter soft and polite, each word measured as carefully as the cut of their gowns. They trade compliments, yes, but beneath the soft praise lies something sharper, a question repeated in different voices, a promise spoken in the hush of velvet and pearl. How do you do it? How do you stay so slender? A mainstream historical fact. Renaissance poets and courtiers praised women who seemed to float like spirits, praising their fragile frames and ethereal grace. Thinness was not just fashion, it was moral virtue, a sign of refined blood and delicate breeding, a soft echo of the angelic in a world that prized heaven over earth. You watch as one woman, her eyes bright with a feverish light, leans forward to share her secret, a diet of nothing but broth and breath, sweetened with rose water and 1,000 whispered prayers. Another murmurs that she drinks only warm water with mint leaves, that the taste of food has become a stranger to her. Their words are soft, gentle, like the rustle of silk in the dark, but you can feel the iron weight beneath them, the quiet hunger that binds them together more tightly than any seamstress's needle. A quirky tidbit: some ladies claimed that writing poems about thinness versus praising their own restraint could strengthen their will, weaving art and appetite into a single, shimmering thread. Historians still argue whether these poems were real or simply the half-truths of diaries and love letters, but you can see how the idea of poetry as diet might have been just another tool in the endless war for perfection. You watch the youngest of them all, her cheeks still soft with the last echoes of girlhood, trying to join the conversation. Her voice trembles as she tells them she's been skipping supper each night, surviving on a single cup of broth and the hope that tomorrow the mirror will be kinder. The others nod, their smiles small and tight, because they know this is how you're taught to belong here, by learning to make your hunger look like grace. You wonder what it would be like to live in that kind of quiet competition, where every laugh is measured, every bite counted in secret ledgers of virtue and shame. Probably not something you'd survive for long. But for these women, this is as normal as the music that fills the air around them, as constant as the flicker of candlelight in the dark. They sip from small cups of spiced wine, but you see how little they drink, how carefully they let the liquid touch their lips and no more. A servant passes with a tray of sugared almonds, and you watch as one woman lets her fingers brush the sweets, just a moment of temptation, before pulling back, her smile never faltering. The almonds remain untouched, a silent testament to the power of refusal. You hear the madrigal rise and fall, the voices sweet and light, and you wonder if the men who wrote those songs ever thought about what it meant to live them. Probably not. They sang of pale cheeks and slender waists as though they were gifts of the gods, never thinking of the price paid for every inch of emptiness. As the song fades, the women rise, smoothing their gowns and tucking away the final whispers of their secrets. You watch them drift away like phantoms, their footsteps silent on the polished floor. In the flicker of candlelight, you see the faint shadows under their eyes, the soft lines of strain around their mouths, traces of the war they fight with every meal, every mirror, every quiet night like this one. You linger a moment longer, the music gone now, the only sound, the quiet sigh of the wind through the cracks in the ancient walls. You wonder if these women ever dream of a world where they could eat and laugh and live without fear that the curve of their waist will decide their worth. Probably not. But here, in the soft glow of the antechamber, the only truth that matters is the one they've woven together. That beauty is as fragile as breath, and thinness is the song they must sing, whether they want to or not. You follow the soft rustle of skirts and the faint scent of rosewater to a hushed corridor where the air is heavy with secrets. Tonight, you're standing at the edge of a small, dimly lit room, a fainting room, the kind tucked away in grand palaces and manor houses, meant for moments when beauty's price becomes too much to bear. You watch as a young noblewoman, her skin pale as ivory, sinks carefully onto a cushioned chaise. Her breaths come shallow and slow, her corset laces still too tight even here, where no one but her maid can see. The maid fans her gently, murmuring soft reassurances, but you know it's a ritual they both know by heart. This quiet collapse that comes after nights and days spent chasing an impossible ideal. A mainstream historical fact. Fainting rooms were common in the Renaissance, quiet chambers set aside for women to retreat when the weight of tight stays and empty bellies grew too much. These rooms were meant to offer a moment of calm, a place to catch one's breath, to let the world slip away for just a little while. You see the young woman's hand trembling as she presses it to her lips, her skin clammy and cold. Her maid offers a small vial of smelling salts, the sharp scent meant to chase away the dizzy haze. But you can see it in her eyes. This faintness isn't just about too tight stays or the heat of the candles. It's the final echo of every small refusal, every whispered promise to be thinner, lighter, more worthy. A quirky tidbit. Some ladies claimed that fainting was almost fashionable, a sign of refinement, and delicacy, proof that one was too pure and fragile for the weight of the world. Historians still argue whether this was truly admired or just quietly pitied, but you see in the hush of this room how the line between performance and reality can blur until no one's sure what's left. You watch as the maid gently loosens the laces of her mistress's gown, her fingers practiced and quick. The young woman's breath shudders in relief, her shoulders slumping forward as she sips at a small glass of water, barely enough to wet her lips, but enough to bring her back from the edge. You wonder if the maid ever wants to tell her mistress the truth, that this isn't grace, it's a kind of slow erasure, a vanishing act played out behind the heavy curtains of the court. But the maid says nothing, because she knows the game too well. She pats her mistress's cheek, murmuring soft words in a language of gentle deception, and together they weave the illusion that this is normal, that this is what beauty demands. You see how the young woman sits up slowly, her eyes glassy and dazed. She smooths her hair, her lips parting in a faint smile as she whispers, "I'm fine." You know she's lying, but here in the fainting room, truth is as thin as the air she struggles to breathe. You wonder what it would feel like to live in a world where fainting is expected, where collapse is a sign of beauty's triumph. Probably not a world you'd last long in. But for her, and for every woman who's ever sat in this small, soft room, it's just another part of the endless performance. A moment to gather herself before she steps back into the flickering candlelight. As she rises, her maid helps her into a fresh gown, the old one now damp with the sweat of near collapse. She ties the laces carefully, not too tight, but still tight enough to shape the fragile line of her mistress's waist. Outside, the night deepens, the hush of the palace broken only by the faint strains of music drifting from some distant hall. You watch her leave the room, her head high and her steps measured, the picture of pale perfection once more. But you know the truth now, that behind every calm, composed face lies the faint echo of this room, the quiet space where beauty and pain meet in a soft sigh. You linger a moment longer, the scent of rose water and faint sweat clinging to the air. You wonder how many more nights she will spend in this small, secret place, how many more times she'll balance on the edge of breath and faintness, all for a beauty that was never meant to be easy, never meant to be kind. You slip quietly from the fainting room, the hush of that small, breathless space still clinging to your senses, and find yourself in the last echoing corridor of this long, winding journey. Here, at the edge of candlelight and memory, you sense how all the tiny choices, every whispered refusal, every secret sip of vinegar, every glimmer of crushed pearls, have built a world where beauty is both currency and cage. The moon has risen high, flooding the stone walls with a soft, ghostly glow. You watch as a woman in a simple linen shift walks slowly down the hall, her steps measured, each footfall like a heartbeat. Her face is pale, her eyes shadowed, but there's a quiet pride in the line of her shoulders, a fragile dignity that no corset can crush. A mainstream historical fact. By the late Renaissance, beauty standards had become so rigid that even artists began to question them, painting portraits where fragility and grace were edged with something darker, an unease that spoke of the price women paid to be admired. Yet still, those portraits were commissioned, and those ideals lingered, bright and cruel as the moonlight. You watch her pause at a window, the pale glow catching the fine bones of her face. She presses a hand to the glass, her breath fogging the cold pane as she gazes out at the silent gardens. There's no feast here, no laughter, just the faint rustle of leaves and the soft sigh of a world that never seems to sleep. A quirky tidbit. Some Renaissance poets wrote of beauty as a kind of ghost, a fleeting thing, always slipping away, always just out of reach. Historians still argue whether those verses were meant as praise or warning, but you can hear the truth of them in the silence of this corridor. She closes her eyes, and you wonder what she sees behind her lids. The candlelit feasts, where she smiled politely and let her hunger gnaw at her bones. The hushed baths, where rosewater and rumors blended like steam. The tiny, deadly sips of mercury and nightshade, swallowed in the dark because the world demanded she glow. You realize that for her, and for every woman who walked these halls, the secret diets were never just about beauty. They were about survival in a world that measured a woman by the slip of her waist, the softness of her breath, the way her ribs might show beneath a silk bodice. They were about finding a sliver of control in a life ruled by men's eyes and poets' pens, about holding on to something, anything, when everything else was decided by the quiet cruelty of a mirror. She takes a slow, steady breath and turns away from the window, her hand falling to her side. She walks on, each step soft but certain, the last echo of centuries of women who learned to live on so little, who learned that sometimes, to be admired, you must learn to vanish. You linger in the hush of the corridor, the scent of rosewater and cold stone filling your lungs. You wonder if the world has truly changed, if the glow of candlelight is so different from the cold light of a modern mirror. Probably not. But here, in this final flicker of the past, you see them all. The duchesses and the maids, the queens and the girls in plain linen, each of them carrying the weight of beauty like a fragile crown. And in the soft silence of the corridor, you hear a final truth. That beauty in the Renaissance was a dance of shadows and light, a quiet, deadly devotion that left no room for softness or ease. It was a song sung in whispers, a secret diet served in silver cups and rose-scented rooms. It was a promise and a peril, a world where to be seen was to be judged, and to be thin was to survive. You let the memory of this night settle in your bones, the quiet breath of centuries drifting over your skin like a cool breeze. And as you turn to leave, you carry with you the echo of every small, dangerous choice that shaped the lives of these women. Choices made in secret, in silence, in the soft glow of candlelight that has never truly faded. Now, let your mind drift away from the stone corridors and candlelit chambers, away from the hushed confessions and the whispered hunger. Let the quiet hum of history fade into the background, like the distant murmur of waves against a far-off shore. You're safe here, in the softness of your bed, wrapped in the gentle darkness of your room. No corsets to cinch your breath, no poisons to sip in secret, no small, careful bites weighed against the mirror's cold gaze, just the soft rhythm of your own breath, the warmth of your blankets, and the knowledge that here, in this moment, you're enough. Let your thoughts slip like petals on water, soft, fleeting, without weight or consequence. Let the images of velvet and pearls drift away, leaving only the quiet comfort of your own heartbeat. There's no need for laced bodices or rose-scented air, no need to measure each sigh or each small indulgence. Here, the only measure that matters is the ease of your breath and the gentle warmth that holds you close. As you settle deeper into the quiet, let the stories of those long-ago women become gentle echoes, fading like the last flicker of a candle before dawn. Their secrets, their fears, their quiet courage, all slipping away now, carried off on the soft hush of sleep. So close your eyes and let your breath deepen. Let the world slip away like silk through your fingers. The night is yours, soft and slow, and you are safe, you are warm, you are free to dream. Good stories don't just help us sleep, they help us wake up differently tomorrow.